We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph and Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 58a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was dealing with the question of Yishmael. Yishmael asked, let's say you have a botzel, let's say you have an onion, and it grows originally in the 7th year, but then there is growth in the 8th year, and the amount of growth in the 8th year is more than the growth in the 7th year. So do we apply the concept of bittul, and we say now that onion is no longer considered produce of Shvius, it's no longer considered produce of the Shemitah year, and it becomes permitted. And the Gemara is now trying to bring an answer to that question from a Brisa. In the Brisa, Rabbi Shimon says, Kol davar sheyesh lo matirin. Let's say you have something which has matirin, meaning to say it is something that eventually will become mutter. Kagon tevel u meiser sheni v'hektish v'chodesh. For example, tevel, meiser sheni, hektish, and chodesh. Those are all things where the isser will go away. So by those things, lo nasnu bahen chachamim shir. The chachamim did not give any amount in terms of bittul. However, v'chol davar she'ein lo matir, something that, let's say, does not have a heter, could go in truma, utrumas meiser, v'chala, v'orla, v'kilei hakerem, like truma, trumas meiser, chala, orla, and kilei hakerem, nasnu bohem chachamim shir. Then the chachamim said, there is an amount in terms of bittul. And the Mefarish explains, could go in tevel, for example, tevel, sheyesh lo matir, and shemasakno, if you have tevel, what is tevel? Tevel is going to be produce where you didn't take off the trumas and meisers. So there is going to be a heter eventually when you do take it off. V'niter, it's going to become mutter when you take off the proper trumas and meisers. Umeiser v'hektish, sheyesh lo matir, and al yedei pediyah, when it comes to meiser, talking about meiser sheni, and hektish, those can be redeemed. V'chodash omer matiro, and when it comes to chodash, when you bring the omer, the chodash, that grain is going to be mutter. So therefore, since these things are yesh lo matirin, they're eventually going to become mutter anyway. So if they do fall into a mixture, even of 1,000 more than them, they're not batel. Because there is some other solution over here, so we don't apply bittul. However, if it's something she'ein lo matirin, which is not going to become mutter at all, so then nasnu b'hem chachamim shir. Then the chachamim said there is a shir, the truma batla b'meya, v'arla b'masayim. Truma is going to be batel. Let's say it's 100 times the amount. Arla will be batel 200 times the amount. So that's the general rule that Rabbi Shimon says. And the Brisa continues, Amru lo, so they responded to him, they said back to Rabbi Shimon the following question from Shemitah. V'halo shvius ein la matirin. Shvius is something which the produce of shvius, there is no heter for it. V'lo nasnu ba chachamim shir, and the chachamim did not give an amount. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, hashvius oseres kol shehu b'mina, that if you have a Shemitah produce, it's going to answer even the smallest amount in a mixture. It doesn't matter how much you have, it's not going to be batel if it is with the same species. Meaning to say, again, you have the same kind of produce mixed up. You have Shemitah produce and non-Shemitah produce, it's going to answer even the smallest amount, even though it is something that is ein la matirin. So they said to Rabbi Shimon, that seems to go against your rule. And the Mefarish over here says, Hashvias oseres kol shehu b'mina, shim nesar v'sa'ah shel chitin shel shvias, be'elef shel heter, ein a b'teila. Let's say you have a mixture of a saw of wheat of Shemitah, and it gets mixed up with 1,000 saw of wheat of heter, there's not going to be bittul. And so the Brisa continues, Amar lahen, so Rabbi Shimon said back to the Chachamim, Af ani lo amarti ela lebiur. Even I only said that halacha in terms of the halachas of biur when it comes to shvius. Aval achila, but when it comes to achila, benosein tam. So there I say there is a shear, and the shear is benosein tam. And the Mefarish explains, Amar lahem afanilo amarti, sheyeh shvius oseres b'mina kolshu. Even I would not say that shvius is going to answer and that there's going to be no shear, because again, the argument of the Rabbanan is that shvius is ein la matirin, and yet there is no shear. And so Rabbi Shimon responds, no, there's only no shear in the following situation. Elo lebir, only when it comes to beer. What does that mean? Shimnot al batzal shel shishis. Let's say a person takes an onion of a 6th year. V'natu b'shvius, now he plants it in the 7th year, so actually the growth is the part that is going to be the usher part. V'hosifa kolshu, it adds on a little bit, even a small, tiny amount. Oh, so kolshu mevatel as ikr, so that little amount of growth is going to be mevatel the original, u'mechayev kulo bebiur de motzai shvius, and therefore now the entire thing is going to be chayev in biur and motzai shvius. The halach is when you have Shemitah produce, so after a certain amount of time, there is a requirement of biur to destroy it. Aval la'achila, but when it comes to achila, meaning to say the other way around, shem nisarvu peros shvius beperos sheminis la'achar shenischayevu bebiur. Let's say you have a situation where it's the produce of the Shemitah year, and now you're going into the 8th year. The 8th year is actually the amount where that's the growth part of it. So that's after there's already a chiyah biur. V'lo biaron, let's say he didn't destroy it properly. The hashta kaimi b'isra achila. Now at this point in time, you have a prohibition of eating the produce. So eino seres ela benosein tam. So in that situation, the original is the part that is asr b'achila, and there actually is a shear. It has to be nosein tam. tam. If you have an amount of growth, and if you have an amount of growth that is more than that, and there is no sein tam, v'im ein ba, but no sein tam is batal. If you don't have the amount that of the original that's going to give taste to the growth, you don't have that amount, so then it is actually going to be batal. Now the point of the Gemara is, Rabbi Shimon did say that when it comes to bior, the gidulin, the growth actually is mevatel the original. So hasam nami b'baya shal yishmal gidul of mevatel esa ikr. That's the proof over here, because the original question of Yishmael also was, does the growth, is that mevatel the original? Rabbi Shimon is saying the growth is mevatel the original, and that's the question of the Gemara. But Rabbi Shimon's response within the context of the Brisa is that there actually is a shear when it comes to Shemitah. When it comes to Shemitah, there's a shear if you're talking about a situation where there's an Isra Achila, and by the Isra Achila, again, that's Davar She'en Lo Matirin, that's why there is a shear. But the Gemara responds, this really does not answer Yishmael's question, because v'dilma hanami l'chumra shani. Maybe over here also, really what we're saying is that there's a bittul going on l'chumra. We're saying, let's say you have a situation where the growth is in the 7th year, and the original was the 6th year, so then we say that there is a bittul in the sense that now the entire thing is chayiv in biur, because the growth is mevatel the original, creating a chayiv, creating a chumra. But again, Yishmael's question was the other way around. Let's say you have a situation where the original is the 7th year, and the growth happens in the 8th year. He wanted to know if the bittul can happen in order to be matir, in order to be lenient. And the Gemara continues, Elamin Hada Pashta, rather maybe we can answer Yishmael's question from the following Mishnah. The Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah, B'tzolim sheyordu aleim geshamim v'tzamchu. Let's say you have onions, and it rains on them and they grow. So im hayu olin shalahen shechorin, let's say in the 7th year is when there is growth. So if the leaves are black, so asurin, that shows that it's fresh, and therefore it is prohibited, that is considered to be a 7th year produce. Hauriku, but if the leaves are green, mutarin, then it's going to be mutter. That's considered like it's already withering away in the Shemitah year, and it's not considered to be produce from the Shemitah year. Rabbi Chananya ben Antigna says he has a different sign to determine what year. And if you're able to pick them up, to uproot them by their leaves, that shows it's fresh, and therefore it's prohibited. And the Mishnah continues, it's going to be exactly parallel when it comes to Motzai Shvias. Mutarin, then it's going to be mutter, meaning to say, if in Motzai Shvias, if in the 8th year, you're able to pull it by the leaves, so then it shows it's fresh, and the growth was really in the 8th year, it's an 8th year produce, so then it's going to be mutter. And so the Gemara now says, that does seem to say that the growth of heter, meaning in the 8th year, if it grows fresh in the 8th year and you're able to pull it by the leaves, let's say, so then apparently that's malin as a isser. That creates some kind of bittul, some kind of nullification, and the growth is able to nullify the original, and apparently we say that it's mutter. That seems to answer Yishmael's question. And the Gemara says to that, v'dilma b'meduchanin. Maybe over there when we say it's mutter, we're really talking about where it is crushed up, where it's ground up. The Mefarish says, v'dilma li'olam ein gidulei heter mevatlan esa isser. And really, maybe the growth of heter is not really being mevatel the isser. V'hacha hechi dami, and here what is the case? Kilomar haidikatani uchenegdol l'masai shvius mutar, meaning when it says over here in the Mishnah that in the parallel case, and the 8th year it's mutter, kagon shahutchu shekasha memeducha, the case is you ground it up already. The lesnu li'karn beinayu, now the original is actually not be'ain, you can't actually see it visibly anymore, it's ground up, and so therefore in that case maybe we would apply the bittul. Avol b'baya the Yishmael the isay likar be'ain, but the question of Yishmael was where you could see the original. Equal member to lo batli. Maybe we would say in that case that it is not batal. And we will take a look at the Ran as well. In the parallel case in the 8th year, it's mutter. Because certainly the growth is more, it's the majority over the original onion. That's how I understand the pshat. So the way he understands is you see that the growth is not drawn after the original. On the contrary, it's the growth that actually raises up the original. The original is drawn after the growth. And then the Gemara responds according to the Ran, v'dilma b'meduchanin, maybe it's ground up, shadach v'shachak habitzolim, again it's all ground up, v'kevan the meduchanin in hu greye, since it was ground up, so it actually is inferior in that situation, v'lo mimshachi gidulin basrayu, and in that particular case, the growth is not drawn after the original. That's the way that the Ran understands the sugya, but in any case, again, it's not going to be a proof, because it's talking about a case where it is ground up. And so the Gemara continues, Elamin Hada Detanya, rather bring a proof from the following Bryce, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis.